Today marks the beginning of a new era. Consumers will soon have nearly 300 new places to pick up beer, wine, and other alcohol products.
On the very day the Ford government passes legislation that will rip up the beer store contract, Finance Minister Vic Fedeli announces the government will make it even easier to buy beer and wine. It's opening it up to 87 more grocery stores starting in September, and it will also create 200 new LCBO convenience outlets in underserved communities. Now, back to that legislation killing the beer store contract. The government today didn't proclaim the legislation, which means technically it's still not in effect, although it can put it in effect anytime it wants. Government sources tell me that it's going to use this legislation kind of like a hammer and a tool to try and bargain with a beer store in the hopes that it can bring down what could potentially be hundreds of millions of dollars in fines. Putting beer in corner stores started as what seemed to be an easy campaign promise by Doug Ford, but it's turned very messy. There's been massive pushback to killing the 10-year contract after just 4 years. Both the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, which represents 3 million companies, are warning ripping up a legitimate contract could deter future business in Toronto. It could also spark an international trade war because the beer store is owned by multinational companies. And a government Twitter campaign backfired with an angry public response.
Have you underestimated the backlash to breaking this beer store contract? And the legislation today wasn't proclaimed, it was merely passed. Are you just simply using that as a hammer in bargaining negotiations?
Well, the poll we really liked last week was hearing from Fitch, our bond rating service, who, after the legislation was tabled, came out and upgraded our position from negative to stable.
With respect, you didn't answer my question at all. Did you underestimate the public backlash? And did you pass this legislation simply to use as a tool, a hammer in negotiations with the beer store?
Well, today the legislation was passed and received royal assent. And what we're hearing from the consumers and from the small chambers of commerce is all very, very good news.
And this was the last day in the legislature here at Queen's Park. It won't sit again until October 28th. That's after the federal election and an unusually long summer break, which has many suggesting that Ford has been told, perhaps by the federal Conservatives, to stay out of the limelight. He's been battered in the polls recently, and many are suggesting that he could hurt Andrew Scheer's chances in Ontario. Government is strongly denying that.